All right, Mako Podcast episode 2. Thank you guys for the feedback on episode 1. I think that the biggest thing that we kind of saw was kind of talking specifically about training and, especially leading into the new year. How do you maximize your time training? What is what is that Mako difference, right? Basically, is what we've seen, and it's been good because you, Aaron, you've been with us now for 6-7 months.
7 months coming up.
But you've been a part of Mako by talking to me and listening to all of our evolution for the last 7 years. So let's just kind of go back. Tell everybody when you started CrossFit. What was day one?
Yeah, we literally started the same exact day. I think it was 2008.
Yes.
CrossFit Troy. It was early days of CrossFit. Warehouse space, small garage, one piece a day, just going in and going ham, dude. We were young. We had no idea what we were really doing training wise at that point. We were just going in and getting after it and having fun. I was at CrossFit Troy for a very short time. I didn't stay as long as you did because I was going off to play college soccer. So, I went more into a, traditional strength and conditioning model for, that 4.5, 5 years. But I still did dabble in CrossFit, in the off seasons when I was home in the summer, we'd always throw down and just do whatever we were doing until, you eventually came down here. 2012 would have been when I moved to Columbus, and I was kind of lost at that point. I'd just gotten injured. I wasn't playing soccer anymore. So I kind of lost myself fitness wise for a while. Got a little dumpy.
Hey, we've all done that.
Yeah, right. At that point I was like, hey, I want to get back into things. I want something to compete in. And at the time, CrossFit Grandview was the place to go if you wanted to be competitive. I was missing that competitive aspect of life. I spent 4 years at Grandview, a little over 4 years. And I went in there thinking I was like a really good athlete. I had just come out a year and a half out of playing professional soccer. I was, fairly strong for my size. Went in there and immediately just got punched in the gut by how freaking awesome some athletes were, man. We had regional level, 2 or 3 regional level athletes. We had, a team at the games the first year that I went there. I think they finished 10th that year. They were a pretty strong team. I was part of that culture, and it was, hey, I'm getting into competing. Getting into it, started to really push into Olympic lifting. So, I was part of that competitive CrossFit program for about 3 years, and then they started their weightlifting program. And that's when I was like a little more into the weightlifting realm. Eventually, when I started competing and lifting, went to CrossFit Clintonville, or Clintonville Barbell specifically, their weightlifting club, and went really into traditional weightlifting training. Sam, Sam.
Yeah.
Sam Hartman, my weightlifting coach for like the last year before coming down here. He was very knowledgeable guy. Taught me a lot about just, how to program, how to write programming, how to approach training, and not so much competition all the time. That's when we really started to, dive into programming together and trying to share philosophies and bounce things back around. Yeah.
Because, when we started, in 2008, like you said, like that one Met kind of day, we started getting after it. And it's funny because like that evolution you just kind of spoke of was like CrossFit based, sports based, right? High sports based, which is like, if you look at it from like the conditioning perspective, like you have a high level of aerobic capacity from soccer playing, have built up explosive speed. So there's a huge base as an athlete there. Then you roll into CrossFit, and this was a pretty much it's a GPP, or general physical preparedness. We'll use that word GPP all the time, but basically that's the base level of your fitness. And so CrossFit works on building that up, but I would say it was even more conditioning heavy, especially early on when we were there at CrossFit Troy. And and then you've progressed to a structured strength and conditioning program, and then came back to CrossFit in a competitive sense, and almost like those seem like very natural tracks. And then you got to, hey, look, the sports specificity of like, all right, now you have this huge base of conditioning and strength, and then you move that into the barbell, and that's I mean, would you say that's really helped you, especially with training and like recovery? Right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think even as a weightlifter now, and you guys who are doing the weightlifting program, especially more recently, I've thrown in a little bit more of that GPP work and conditioning. It's been a large part of why I'm able to go in and get after it consistently. I've stayed fairly healthy. I get banged up occasionally. I'm going after it, but yeah, I definitely think in terms of how I move. How I recover and really just how I approach training as a whole. I think it's really shifted that mindset on how I approach it.
Right. Like I try to explain to people sometimes when they're like, man, I really want to do 50 power snatches for time. And they're like, why is the fitness just kettlebell swings? And I'm like, well, a simple question to ask yourself is how many kettlebell swings have you done in your life, right? Are you in the thousands? Because I would say if you're not in the thousands on the kettlebell swing, we're almost missing this huge base of conditioning. And that's just looking at one movement of the kettlebell swing. But we're missing the kettlebell swing. So do we really need to snatch at that moment? Now, if your goal is weightlifting, you do need to snatch. But I would say you still need heavy doses of things like kettlebell swings and deadlifts and sumo deadlift high pulls, things that are hip hinging and teaching that explosive hip strength. And so that's what's been pretty interesting because when we started out writing, I started writing out programming for Mako, which has now been 7 years. It took me a long time to really understand what does this population of people need most, and how to be the most effective to a group. And so I kind of want to dive into that today a little bit. But I think that we can draw some comparisons and some contrast to what I would say is a very highly successful gym. If you measured it by number of people, right? I think, and let's just measure it on that, how many people they train, right? Their standing as far as how long they've been in business, and then you could say, hey, they've gotten competitive people there, but I don't necessarily judge. That's where I think my difference would be is do we judge it on how competitive athletes get? So first off, my question to you would be, at CrossFit Grandview, what was the vibe training there? How were the classes structured? How did that go?
In terms of the class, the actual class structure, so they had their general population class every day. Even that group, it was a very competitive atmosphere though.
What was the age range roughly?
They're right on Ohio State's campus, so
yeah.
They had a lot of that late teens, early 20s group. Right. I'd say 19 to 26. Just throwing in numbers out there.
Yeah.
But then they also had that other group from the surrounding area that were just there for general fitness and that. So every class was
the professionals,
very,
the business professionals,
early
families,
30s, families,
old. What I see is old competitive athletes.
Yeah, people who are my age.
You're high. I call them the high risk athletes personally because they're oh man, I'm getting back into it, getting after it. Sometimes you got to reel those people back in.
Yeah.
So you got all those people working out together. So Grandview's track record, though, from a competitive standpoint, CrossFit Games, multiple regional level teams, right?
And individuals. I think at one point they had 4 regional level and individual athletes,
right.
all training at
how
one
many
time.
How many people were training there? Talk about total gym number.
Dude, total gym number there. I can't even put a number on it, but I want to say it was 300 plus. I mean, it was a big
huge
gym,
pool,
big space. They could facilitate that. They've had, from an outsider's perspective, it looks like they've crushed the COVID transition too. I mean, they've got everything marked out the same way that we do individual spaces. They've kind of had to pivot like everybody, but massive gym. I mean, every class 20 plus easy. So I mean, you walk into a class full of 20 people, almost everybody had somebody at their level that was pushing it, and that's what they really pushed. They pushed the intensity, they pushed the competition, and that competitive culture was definitely running throughout that, even in their general fitness class.
Right. So they were very competitive gym as far as compete first, and that might be the big. And so we'll get into some distinctions of where we may. I'm basically I just want to paint the framework of their philosophy, right?
Right.
It sounds like, if I put in my own words, is that very, very competitive oriented at all levels. You're there to compete every day, and you're trying to push it. How So how did they handle effectively 20 people in a class at multi levels? How would you grade them on being able to handle, people at all skill levels in a 20-person class?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely didn't lose from like a quality standpoint, like in terms of the quality of coaching that they had. But when you have that many people in the room, there's gonna be people that get lost in the shuffle. I mean,
yeah. Well, I know
right?
that. That's why I'm
Yeah,
asking.
yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things where like, yeah, I never really struggled with it because I was going in there and I felt pretty confident in what I was doing and my ability to take what the coach was giving me in their demos and then applying it right away. So I didn't really struggle with that, but I know other people did. And I know some people just came in and immediately were just like, well, I'm not here to compete. Like, I'm just here. And they, I think, at times felt out of place there.
Yeah. So, like, and I've struggled with that too. Like, I mean, even most recently, before we switched over compete to being in True Coach, I was programming based on past experiences of like when I trained, and I was like, well, this is a pretty average amount of volume, and then you start realizing people aren't doing it, and it starts getting lost in the sauce. Um, you know, it's interesting to hear about that because like some gyms are very successful pushing nothing but competitive athletes, and I think there's always room for competing as a sport. I always question the long-term effectiveness of a competitive programming only because I did competitive programming for a couple years, got pretty competitive. I mean, I was a regional athlete. I was finished top 90 in the Open.
Yeah, you did all right, man.
Yeah, I went to the games in 09, right? I mean, that was back in the day before I went in the military. But yeah, I did all right. But realistically, like, there was the way I was training then had such a short shelf life on like how long I could do it. I came out of that really burnt out, really beat up.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people probably don't really know like the decision on kind of why you stopped, competing. Really,
right.
I mean, I think that's really a good topic to kind of touch on, like what that type of training kind of led to for you.
Yeah, and the whole reason I like because I'm always intrigued by like you're like, hey, Grandview does this and this, and I asked you a bunch of questions, and when you were still there, I was trying to see how I could frame my programming, and Mako is definitely, in my opinion, a longevity driven programming of strength and conditioning. And I did that based a lot on personal experience. So, and I was competing and, I like started really competitive training in 13. And then I, competed at the regionals at 14 and then at 15 and then coming out of 15, not like, so the body was a little banged up, but could still do a lot. But what happened for me was, I definitely hit a wall of like, my drive, I'd wake up tired, worn out, have to drink coffee for the whole day, have to find stimulants and things like that, whether it be like even like nicotine every now and then, right? Like you like start dipping every now and then. I'm like, what is going on? And I went and got my blood work done, and it came back that basically what I had done is I had pushed so hard of that fight or flight response so often, from training really hard and competing super hard and competing every day, trying to put up a world beater score every single day, knowing that like I'm chasing to hit these games numbers, and I was doing it, but I was doing it at the detriment of my health. So my cortisol was very high, my testosterone had dropped down, which was like 400, which isn't like crazy low. I know guys that have like no SF dudes that have been like in for the game for a long time that are like in the 90s,
right? And
you'd never know because those are the baddest dudes alive,
right?
I mean, the baddest. One of my buddies, he's getting out. He'd been blown up by a grenade like twice, like jack dude, and freaking screws in his neck, all this other stuff, and he's like, man, testosterone's down to 90, and I was like, holy shit, man! Like you had to feel terrible because what happened to me is I just started waking up and I'm like, I have my dream job. I have a wonderful wife. We're working on getting pregnant at this time. And I'm like trying to build this family and I don't feel any joy. So I was like super honest with the doctor. I was like, listen, I'm not depressed, but like, and I'm not like suicidal, but I do wake up and say like, here's another day. You know what I mean? Like, not like, you know, it's like, I've never used the word depressed. I was just like, man, I don't see any like joy in like the sunrise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was
you
like,
knew, you knew something was
yeah,
off.
yeah. And he was like, well, here's the numbers for you. And he was like, you know, basically I pushed my dopamine response so much with like coffee and like doing things that to like get them to get that stimulant that I had this dopamine crash. He's like, you're basically trying to create a chemical process that you don't have the fundamental ingredients for. And so basically cortisol is what results in that. So you get the stress hormone. And so I was in this vicious cycle. And so, like I made a hard choice at that point, like to be like, all right, I need to change what I'm doing. And so I laid off all that stuff. He gave me some like all natural stuff. I actually did go on Clomid though for like, I think it was like a week and a half. Like I was like, I'm not competing anymore. I'll take this. It's a banned substance in competing. But I did take it for a week and a half. He's like, do you want it the fast route or the all natural? I was like, well, can I do a little of both? You know? And so I took it for like a week and a half, and it did bring back my testosterone levels back up. And then I just went to like basically just like focusing on what I should control, which was like sleeping, eating right. And then man, dude, it has been a never-ending battle from that moment in like 2016 for like figuring out what training looks like, how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of led me to where I am now, which is pretty much just doing the class workouts.
Right. Well, I think too, like during that time, like I remember, like, you know, pre all that happening, like the environment at Mako when I would come down here was very much what I was describing at Grandview.
Yeah, it's very competitive.
I know you'd
True,
walk
yeah.
in there and it was like, you know, I'd come down to visit and we'd hit, you know, 5 or 6 pieces a day, dude, and we were training for 7 hours a day. It was crazy. And there were other people doing it right there with us.
Yeah.
Like talk about that like shift in like how that affected the class and what you were doing programming wise at Mako, because I remember like visually seeing that shift happen, and then like seeing your program and following your program from afar, like I could see that kind of evolution happening and change.
Yeah, so it was always hard for me to separate class, and I think there needs to be a distinction between class and compete, and that's why I wanted you to paint the picture of Grandview of like all these people of all different levels coming in. They're all snatching, they're all doing all this stuff, they're all pushing the intensity every single day, and I always questioned if that was right, especially coming from where I was. Now, when I was competing, we had the most competitive people, right? We had regional teams every time I went to regionals. I was still like I would say I was still dabbling in competitive training, and you know, we were able to push a couple masters athletes. You know, Shannon Aiken, who won in 2017.
Champ.
Yeah, the champ, baby. You know, that was a great experience from a coaching perspective when it came to competing. But I wrote programs specifically for him, and it needed to be separated from class. But I would say from like where he got to, he did mostly class leading up to about where the Open was. So it was like probably like 6 months to when he was at the games and peaked.
Yeah.
So yeah, the competitive training was really tracked off of like what I was doing, and I was changing things based on like skill level. But they were pushing, we're pushing multiple pieces. Like, you know, somehow I wonder sometimes like how the business did well that entire time, because I was like, you know, now I'm so focused into the business and the class product that I'm like, man, I totally just like, there was years where I was just training, like, you know, and we had good coaches there that were there to coach, and that was the biggest thing. But you know, I think the big shift was like questioning how many times should you do, like, I just think of workouts that are like squat snatches and muscle ups. Like, how effective of a conditioning piece is that for someone who's 35, 40, who's coming in to just be healthy and look better and feel better.
Yeah,
right?
and maybe just hit their first muscle up.
Yeah, and even if there's even if there's a sub for that workout, okay, and we can now scale that pretty well. And we always did, but it was always hard to get someone to say, I want to scale that. And so before, it was like there was the workout and we would modify for the individual, but everyone loves that RX button, right? Like that RX button is like the first thing. It was like click. And so we used to call it, there used to be like 3 levels. I had base, which was what our fitness is now. It was prime, which was like our class. Then we had peak. So we shifted to this peak, which was like the competitive side of things, right?
Yeah,
So it was like that peak
RX
competition.
plus
That RX plus button. Yeah, it's that RX plus button. And we pushed that for a while. And I think it was good, but it was funny. Like no one wanted to do base, so it was like no one wanted to do it. And then people would sit around that prime, and everyone was always chasing that RX Plus. And I'd always come back to like, what are people gonna leave here with where are they going? And like, we get a lot of students, right? We get a lot of flight students, and like their job is to fly aircraft.
Right. They gotta
That's
be
your
healthy.
job.
Gotta be healthy to
That's
do
your
that.
job.
Yeah.
Your job isn't to snatch fucking 185 for reps and go into a muscle up. Like that's not your job. And so I would try to remember that and try to remind people as I was trying to change their perspective of like, no, what do you mean we're not doing 8 pieces today and we're not doing all of this? Like, well, it's not necessary for fitness or for your goals, so let's kind of change that. Now, when I switched over to the 2 programs of performance and fitness, well, the funniest thing was I just changed the name base to fitness, and people were like, oh, this is awesome, this new fitness program. I'm like, I changed literally nothing other than the name of it. Right? Like, it was just like, okay, so we just had to name it something else. But focusing around that fitness and performance, which I think that's been going on since like 18, was a big shift for us. And I think people started to realize it and started to realize like the benefits of training, but training at your for your goals, for not necessarily and your skill level, but your goals is so important to think about when you're training. That like your goals are to feel good, push longevity, be stronger, right?
Be able to enjoy the time at home with your family and your
kids.
Be
able to enjoy your time. Well, then now I start trimming back that program in my eyes, and that's where we are today. Where I feel like it is a strength and conditioning program for the general public, and I think that should be the base. Because like we talked about your base, which was like soccer, so lots of aerobic capacity.
Right.
You went to doing CrossFit, like pure CrossFit, like very GPP oriented, not necessarily strength biased, but CrossFit.
Yep.
Then you went to strength and conditioning, competing in CrossFit, back to weightlifting, and that's my point. I think that in the general class, if your goal is to compete, you still need a healthy dose of that GPP and strength work, and so that's where we are today.
Yeah, no, I think GPP, it's the not sexy stuff, right? It's the stuff that isn't the high skill level movements, but
no, it's carries.
It's
carries. It's running. It's
the
throwing.
It's the long EMOMs that you guys get once a week that you're like, man. I think like looking at just like an individual week, like maybe just run through like how should you be looking at that? How should you approach that? Like that idea of like, hey, we're coming in to train for longevity. Like how do you see that kind of road mapped out in like a week, and how you plan a week or an individual day even?
Yeah, so like from a programming perspective, I got hired on to work for WOD Prep and write programming for people all over the country, and all over the world. Actually, I had people over in Germany and Belgium, and so I was programming for these gyms. And there's so many programs out there that I was like, dude, I just need to define what I stand for. Like, and I'm like, this is what I stand for. You're signing up to work with me. I'm not going to start throwing in things that I don't think are necessary for that general public fitness. So it's like defining it as like highly effective, safe, right, and fun, right? So like that's it. So like when we write the programming, I've eliminated some stuff. Like we still do snatching, and we do cleans, we do variations of those things. So I think those are good, and those are good skills to learn. But I don't think that they're necessary to do in a lot of crazy high volume or turnover. So when I lay out the week, I don't like things to go like every Monday you squat. So it's all predictable. Because if you only came Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're gonna squat. You're gonna do whatever's on Wednesday. You'll always do this on Friday.
Yep.
So I lay out things in I lay out blocks first. So it's like you got a 6 to 8 week block. We define what those blocks are. If they're what we call a build block, and building is more foundational for our programming. And right now we're in what I call a tough phase. So if you guys know what the phase is, like tough means like we do a lot of CrossFit right now.
Right.
We push a little higher intensity.
For a reason. We're in that kind of prep season for, the Open, which is our time to compete.
Yeah, it is our time to compete. And even if you're there for general fitness, like that's why we still write fitness. But we do want to have those periods of high intensity. But we look at that build phase, which we stay in most of the year, which is like focusing on movement patterns. So like we'll do things that are higher skilled, but they'll be very controlled, whether it's like a high hang power snatch plus overhead squat or whatever. We'll build that over time. Our squatting is a lot of higher volume squatting. right? We do a lot of like relative intensity. Like we came off doing all those 8s
Yep.
and 10s, and like so that's what we focus on during that time. And then hammering like single leg work and strict gymnastics. Those are big parts of that build phase. And as we move to a tough phase, we want to focus on, that's where we're like, hey, let's get this kipping volume higher. You've developed the kipping skill in that base phase. So now we're gonna try to push that phase, and then we go to like the second, which now we're in like the second tough phase in a row, and that's where now it's like, oh, higher volume kipping in workouts, and making sure obviously that we're modifying that down to the fitness level, but that's what it looks like. And so that 9-day plan, like we're always gonna squat heavy, we're always gonna press heavy. We get into the new location, we'll be pulling heavy, and so where we can drop weights, so things had to kind of change based on that. But there needs to be a heavy dose of quote unquote heavy lifting, and that doesn't mean lose your form, lose your technique, blow it out. They're set up to be like daily maxes for the day. So it's like you have 12 minutes to establish a 3-rep max. Like, is that really a true 3-rep? Probably not. I mean, some guys, like, Nate's a good example because he's very much built as a CrossFit athlete. Like, he doesn't need a ton of time to recover in between sets, so he can kind of push that volume and hit those higher numbers. But that's what it is. Like that time limit is meant to be the regulator of the workout.
Right.
And
kind
then
of auto regulation built in without even.
Right.
Yeah, you don't even have to know that. But
yeah, you don't even have to know it. But that's what it's.
Right.
Yeah, it's auto regulated to be like, listen, you only have 12 minutes to hit this, and if you're doing it proper, you're making good jumps, you're making it look good. Well, that's it. Like some days you're gonna PR,
some days you're
not.
gonna feel good and you're gonna go for it, and other days you're gonna be like, this feels like a house.
Yeah, and so then it's just like you just hit that heavy set of 5. Not every day needs to be a PR, right? And I think that's the mindset that if I could get everybody to understand, and I think naturally most people do now, just based on I don't know what it is, like the on ramp or what it is, but I do feel like most people understand how to approach the day. But like, you should not be competing every day, right?
Yeah.
Like that is so, like, that's hard to not do. Even for myself, like, dude, I like checking that ego and being like, dude, I mean, I hit that squat rep and I'm like, man, I got to hit a 3-rep. Well, last week we did 2 and I hit it at this. So this is what I want to hit, but I might only hit 70% of what I actually thought I was going to hit, or maybe 80%. But still, like, being able to back off that and realizing, like, based on life stress, based on the previous day's workout, based on, your water and food and alcohol consumption over the last 48 hours is going to play into that. So I think just trying to, like, teach people more about listening to their body and coming in and hitting the stimulus. And so that means, like, if it's heavy, go heavy relative on the day. If it's fast, go fast relative to the day, right? And if it's sustained, then try to just sustain that pace.
Yeah, I think as a coaching staff and in watching all of the coaches run classes, I think we do a really good job at trying to educate people on that. Like, hey, this is what we're doing on the day. Like, this is what the intended stimulus is, and don't fuck with that stimulus, right? Like, hey, like we're setting out this way. Like, it might be a little slower. We're running it at 70 to 80% today. Like, why is that important, right? Like, why do we set up those parameters and push, not to go super down the rabbit hole on like the energy systems and all that, but like, just like, I think that's a big thing that people maybe just don't understand why stuff's written like that. Yeah,
look, I'm a knuckle dragger. I do understand energy systems pretty well, but I also know that most of them are theoretical, and unless you're looking at the individual person, it's going to be changing at all times, and all energy systems come in. So like when we write workouts, like last week we had 30 seconds of power cleans, 30 seconds of bar facing, or no, it was double unders, 30 seconds, power cleans, bar facing bursts. So you rest 1-to-1, so you rested 90 seconds, and then you did double unders, push jerks, and kettlebell swings. Well, those, we a lot of hinging there, right? But the pairings are like pressing and pulling, or like hip extension and pressing. And so when we look at that, like, what was the goal there? It was 4 rounds, which is a healthy dose, right? I mean, it's a total of, you got 12 minutes of total work. If that was written as a 12-minute AMRAP, how would you approach it? And the goal is to teach people how to move efficiently and to breathe through movements that aren't just monostructural. So like, you're running, it's easy to go to consistent breathing pattern. It's it's 2 in, 2 out, or 3 steps in, 3 steps out. And when we switch over to doing power cleans or kettlebell swings and things like that, we want to try to have people teach it, or we're teaching you that without trying to say, hey, here's exactly what you're doing. But the real goal is that, like, if you hit that at a moderate pace, like, you know, I was working out with a couple people, and I won't name names because I love working out. If you guys want to come work out with me, it's usually like 9:30, 10. You can always jump in with me. And we get done with the first round, wrote our numbers down. And then after that, second round finished, they went back and started writing again. And I said, hey, what are you guys doing? You know, if you did this workout right, you only had to write it once.
Right.
You know, you wrote the first round, and now you either made your bed and you're going to hold, and that becomes a mental battle, or you paced it right and you just get to hold. But the thing is learning how to pace, because I think that, like, you know, regardless if you wanted to be better at CrossFit, like the sport of it, you want to improve your Metcon times. Like, I don't always want to sit here and say, it's all about improving your times, you know, but that will improve your times. It'll improve how you pace and how efficiently you move between movements. But say you're just there for that general fitness, like that 90 second on, 90 second off time frame at a moderate intensity, it's pretty common in, like, running, right, or rowing or anything else. And all we're doing is we're trying to keep it fun, keep it exciting, and keep you thinking, you know what I mean? And that's really why we do that in the class.
Yeah, no, I think like learning how to pace is a very difficult thing, like especially when you are focused purely on the time. Like, you're gonna go hard every time.
Yeah.
If that's all you're worried about.
Well, that's why we try to, like, say, like, record your lowest reps.
Right.
So a lot of times, like, record your slowest time, because your slowest time actually should be your fastest time, because they should be the same.
The same. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why it's like, record your slowest time. That's your goal. And, you know, and it's about the athlete individually learning that. I mean, you know, if you're doing this for fitness or you're doing this to compete, you still want to do it better. I mean, that's why you came. That's why you chose to train the way we train, is that you want to improve. And that is a personal journey. You know, back, you know, I went to another CrossFit there in Troy at the Practice CrossFit, and had some guys that we trained with, and we had this saying, like, where's your whiteboard? Your whiteboard's right here, right? It's like, it's yourself, right? It's you. You're your whiteboard. Stop worrying about everybody else's training. Worry about your own and try to improve on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not gonna lie, that's really hard. It's really hard for me.
Yeah.
Coming from being super competitive to being like, nah, I might not be at the top of the leaderboard or whatever. I mean, but I still need to just train and do. Like, I can't let that be the thing that holds me back, is my ego.
Yeah.
Of being like, I can't set this down. I gotta win. You know. And that's really what you should focus on, is moving efficiently, right? Learning how to breathe in the different movements, and then you can start working on increasing your paces, increasing your times.
Yeah, I think that's like, you know, how do you judge that? You know, hey, am I getting better, right? Like, you know, if it's not all about the number and we're doing these things, like, how do you objectively look and say, like, am I moving the needle? Yeah, I think that's always something that I'm trying to evaluate. Like, I'm always going back and looking at old things and just looking at how I've progressed. So I like having a way to go about doing that. You know, I don't know if you have suggestions on, like, really just being objective about that.
Yeah. Well, number one, logging.
Things.
Right? Yeah,
right.
logging.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're in Wodify solely, it's logging, especially the benchmark stuff. Like, those are our metrics, is the benchmark. It's the benchmark Metcons. It's the benchmark gymnastic pieces, where it's an AMRAP, or it's the benchmark strength pieces. And those are the most important things to log. I do look at, like, I will actually look at people's scores on the other pieces just to see if, like, the fitness hit the target range that I thought, because you're working on a general population here. Like, you got to try to control a lot of factors and try to get the most effective training there. But if you're in something like True Coach, which is what our barbell's in, that's what Compete's in, that's what any kind of extra programming that's written on top of classes in, you know, your job is to log everything. Like, it's to write down, you know, because you can write that stuff down and come back, but also, like, it's really easy for us to look at and to say, okay, so-and-so was good here, they struggled here, we can ask them follow-up questions, and it happens very fast. And we've been doing that with Compete, even on their class workouts. So they log their class workouts in True Coach, and I go and ask follow-up questions, and I'll make adjustments to the macro plan of what Compete is, to get them better and to prepare them for it.
Yeah, no, I think it's that's a really easy way for us to, you know, see as the collective, like, hey, if everybody's having that down, if it's not just an individual and it's the group, like, that's where we know we missed the kind of mark and we have to pivot.
Yeah, we make like, dude, this isn't like a perfect thing. Like, not every workout is going to be perfect, and not every big block is going to be perfect, but it should be pretty good, and there always needs to be a rhyme and a reason for what we're doing. And that's why I'm always like, especially now that I've been in there very consistently, like during the middle of the day, people have been able to ask me a lot of direct questions on programming and like programming philosophy, and it's been good to be able to answer those. And like I tell anybody, like if I can't answer your question to like why, you probably shouldn't be following me. Like you should
Right.
not be following the program I write if I can't be like, this is what we're doing here. Here's why we're doing it. And I've been honest. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I did do it got a little too grippy this week or something like that. So let's make sure we're focusing on that on the next week or where we're moving to. Because like I said, I write these big block templates out and then I fill in the days. So it's not like I sit down and just write an entire 6-week block.
Yeah.
Because you make pivots
Yeah,
every week.
right.
But yeah, like making sure that we're making those changes, and that does come directly from athletes' feedback. You know, it's like how many classes are they attending a week? And if you guys are unsure of how many classes to attend, you know, like number one is like listen to your body. If you have a consistent schedule of like maybe you don't have a consistent schedule. Maybe like I get in when I can.
Yeah, step one.
Step one, just get in when you can.
Right.
Totally fine. But like what we really shoot for, because we are writing a group program, like for you to come 6 days in a row, not good. It's just not like
Right.
6 days in a row, like from the programming, because we're expecting rest days in our programming. Like I don't know when you're gonna rest, but I know you will rest at maybe Wednesday or maybe it's Thursday. That we need to make sure that like, you know, there's these like 3 days are like waved up and there's different intensities, but as you know, a good rule of thumb is like 2 to 3 days on,
Yeah, 1 day off.
1 day off.
Yeah, that's the old the original CrossFit
Yeah.
was 3 days on,
Yeah.
1 day off, 2 days on,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah, like me personally, right now I'm doing, you know, and this is just based on if everything goes perfectly, I'm hitting 4 like of the class workouts a week. So it's like Monday through Wednesday, rest Thursday. I hit Friday. You know, if I think I'm gonna miss Friday, I go to Thursday.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I try to do some sort of running or biking or something outside of the gym on the weekends, just because, you know, it is family time, and not having like, I don't have set days to work and not work. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like always working
Right.
kind of thing. I just try to make sure I set up time to just move and to not have to worry about it. So like the weekend for me is like, there's things I have to get done, but I try to just kind of shut it off and just move. I don't want to go to the gym and move. I just want to move, and you know, maybe that's in the garage, maybe that's just out running.
Yeah, no, I think as I'm getting older and, you know, other things in life are becoming more of a priority than training. You know, you only need to do enough to get a response, and
Minimal
then
effective
you need,
dose.
and then you need
Yeah.
to recover, right?
Minimal effective dose, yeah.
Yeah, you're joking about Nate earlier. Like the dude comes and trains 3, maybe 4 days a week tops.
Yeah.
And he's
High
able
level.
to
High
to a
level.
high level, and then he recovers, and
Yeah.
you know that's where it is. And
Yeah, he has probably like one of the
less
lower
is less is
training-
more.
Yeah,
Less is more.
Yeah, it's enough is enough. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I think that's really tough. So I've had trouble kind of getting that across to like endurance athletes are always the toughest to get to understand that, because a lot of their stuff was so aerobic, and we do aerobic stuff, but you know, aerobics, what is it? It's over 2 minutes or something, right? So it's like we're already aerobic pretty much every day, but the difference is like the intensities and the pairings. Like, you know, like a lot of those EMOMs are supposed to be muscular. We're pushing on muscular endurance, so we have like a 1-to-1 rest, and it's very repetitive. You know, whether it's lower body or upper body, and that is the stimulus, and that takes time to recover from. If you hit that, and you try to come in and hit some higher skill the next day, like it's probably not going to work out. And so that's kind of why we've shifted the Compete program to be like one thing outside of class for
Right.
now. Like we'll watch how that goes.
Yep.
But people don't know that like there's 3 levels of that Compete right now based off of a questionnaire of being like, where are you on your gymnastics? Where are you in your barbell? Where are you on your, like, for the sport of CrossFit, and what are your goals? And so we write versions of Compete for every level, and whether that's a local level or it is that higher level of like, you know, the national level or games level.
Yeah.
That's what we've kind of focused on.
Yeah, and then, you know, we're going to monitor that for the people that are doing the Compete program, right?
Right.
And, like, we're going to say, like, hey, they're ready for that next thing. Yeah, but if you're just somebody in the general class, like how would you suggest somebody, hey, I'm training 3 days a week right now. Like I really want to get to 4 or 5. Like, how do you know when you're ready to do that? Like, how do you know when it's like, hey, I need more. I need that next piece. I need that next level. Like, how would you, objectively tell somebody that they're ready for that?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is like so you have to ask some questions of yourself. Like, are you motivated to do another workout? Right, that would probably be like, it's like, how do you feel? I mean, there's like all these crazy watches and stuff, and I'm all about the the HRV, Whoop, all that stuff, and that stuff can be very helpful data, but I almost get paralysis by analysis a lot of times. I'm like, well, I guess I didn't recover, or like I have to do it, so it becomes an issue to me. So I think the best thing to do is like, are you motivated to do another workout? Do you feel good? And then how were your performances of the whole week? Like if you crushed 3 days, like you came in and like not meaning you won the workout. I'm saying like you know that you put everything into those workouts. You pushed the intensity the entire time. Well, then in that case, like maybe another workout will be good for you because you're recovered, you're motivated, and your performances were high. When to rest is like obviously not motivated. That's a big one. Don't want to work out. Now there is a difference between like not wanting to work out because it's cold or something like that, or like really feeling beat up, and then you should still move, walk, come in and ride the bike, come in and ask questions. We'll change the workout for you, but on top of that, like your scores are poor. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the big things when I saw the way Compete was going. Because I just sort of met, hey, how are your stuff here? And like, man, bombed out of that one stuff. And I was like, man, we're way overtraining. Like that's a big sign of overtraining is like plateauing or, even regressing, and that stuff's easy to do if you're not paying attention. So just remember, like, you can always do something that day. Like you can always probably do some plank holds, walks, carries.
Go back to some just GPP
stuff. Yeah, GPP stuff. Yeah, I mean, God, we could talk about GPP and like,
I know.
I know. West Side barbell. Like, I mean, it's like, Louis Simmons West Side stuff's like, dude, it's like carry something, pull a sled. Like, that stuff's huge.
Yeah, he's like, I was listening to a podcast with him earlier this week, and he was like, like you walk in and you have the extra 5 minutes, like hit 3x15 and some shoulder press, and like you just
it.
Yeah, like that's it.
That's
like,
it.
You've got 5 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't even talk about that. Grandview did have the West Side program, the conjugate program that they ran, and I did that for a while, and it was all GPP.
Yeah. So that actually, let's go ahead and talk about that because I think that's something that because we're not done growing this program.
Right.
We're always trying to improve on what we're doing. Right. Like that's why we shifted Compete to being in True Coach, because I can really affect the individual person. I can see we did a little tester workout, and like a lot of people just couldn't hit the handstand walk at the end under fatigue. So in my eyes, I'm like, well, that's going to be a part of their track now is getting them ready to do handstand walks under fatigue. But we also are doing Mako gymnastics. So if you wanted to just do extra gymnastic work, we'll do the same thing. Throw you out a questionnaire, throw some tests out at you. You want to just do extra gymnastic work outside of class, we'll do that. But then there's the other thing of like, when do we start doing powerlifting? Because I want, the reason why it's called Mako Barbell is because, our long-term vision is to have strength in powerlifting and things like that.
Yeah.
So what would you say? So here, actually, this would be good because you have people already doing barbell club and class. What is the biggest issue that those people that are doing barbell club and class that you think is like, something you're like, man, I got to really deal with this, like, and something that maybe you can help educate them on.
Yeah.
As far as like, when do they do it? Because the class is always moving and they have those things. What do you suggest athletes to do?
Yeah, and I've had a lot of those conversations one-off with all the individuals that are doing that. Early on, and it was like they're trying to do, 3 days of weightlifting and 5 days of class, and it was like, they're just burying themselves, and I could see that. So, initially it was like, hey, 3 and 3, right? Like you're still getting 6 days a week. You're still getting, 2 days of rest in there because you're going to double one of those days up. So, giving them suggestions like, hey, it's 2 days where you're doing just weightlifting, 2 days where you're doing just CrossFit, and then that 1 day where you're doing both. Suggesting just, what days to do paired with which days, right? do the lifting early, right? High skill, high speed, high strength movement.
Right.
Do it before the class if you can. And then the other thing, we're aware of what's going on in the programming, but we're not really letting it influence what's actually happening within the individual programs, if that
Right.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
like, hey, you're squatting today, you've got sets of 8s. I'm pushing, a heavy single or something. Like, what do I have people do? How, like,
Right.
do I tell
Yeah.
them to
Yes.
cut,
Yeah.
cut
Classes
that
at
piece
8,
out?
you're at 1.
Yeah. So, just saying like, hey, based on what you told me your goals are, like, you don't need to be doing that heavy single today. Like, hit the main lifts, hit the snatch or with the clean and jerk that's in the day. Go into the class afterwards and hit that squat.
Right,
you,
like
you
maybe
need
you're
to,
a squat,
you need to
yeah.
get more volume.
Like maybe you're someone who's like
Yeah.
newer too. Like,
Yeah.
and most of the people that are in the barbell club that are coming in, I mean, they would be considered a novice in the barbell
Right.
world. So they usually do higher volume kind of squatting
Right.
as a base.
Yeah, you don't
because
need to
that's
be
the base.
in a comp phase where you're hitting a bunch of heavy
Yeah,
singles
dude,
right now.
the
Go
work- yeah,
go
dude.
hit the 8s in the class. You're gonna get way more out of it, and long term it's gonna be better for your
Yeah,
development.
people coming in like trying to do small of in the class and like that kind of stuff. All like in that and I had no real solution other than being like that is dumb. It's like that was it. And I'm just really glad that like now we have the barbell. We have barbell rolling, so where people can focus on that and they can be like, hey, this is going to line up with class. And again, if your goal is specificity of the barbell, then that's the barbell club. If your goal is to be good at you want to push the health and the fitness, but you also want to push extra barbell work, we have that too. And I think that like
Right.
that's good that you're able to kind of do that, because I was like, hey man, like I don't really want to sit down and change my programming
Right.
to
Neither-
your
neither
program.
of us did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's just too hard. Like
Yeah.
that I think that I've done that, you know what I mean? And like that's why like even like now like writing compete on top of class, it has its own set of challenges to do that, because I used to write compete all by itself. But I believe that the class programming is such a good base of CrossFit that every competitor at every single level needs that stuff.
Right.
And so that's why that programming is like my main focus, and then writing like the other stuff on top of that to develop skills.
Yeah.
Now, powerlifting specifically, I know we talked about the new space.
Yeah.
We're going to have that entire area that's going to have platforms. No, I can't wait either. We're going to have platforms over there. Like, the goal is to get turf in there at some point so we can push sleds inside too, and do those things. What would you see, like, if you're going to put off this, like, all right, you've Mako barbell as an umbrella now, and now it's got you can call weightlifting, right? Which is
Right.
a sport, is Olympic lifting of some people, but it's weightlifting. And then under that, like to the side of that, you've got powerlifting. What would that look like for a general? What would you think that would look like for a general person? Would you push, 5? Like, would you have anything specifically, or would you go like conjugate, or would you think it's going to be?
I think I'm like, from my experience training in powerlifting for the very short period that I did when I was coming back from an injury, I was just at a point where I couldn't do the snatch and the clean and jerk. I was dealing with some limitations that didn't allow me to do that with the ankle coming back from that. That's what I know. So, I mean, I'm going to start with that, West Side split, which, 4 days a week, you have a max effort in the upper and the lower. And then at the end of the week, you have a dynamic effort in the upper and the lower. So, what does that really mean? If you don't know, you're doing one day where you're pushing to absolute max and something, some variation, a lot of variance in it. You're going to push either, a heavy single or a rep max and whatever the exercise is on your max effort days. And then at the end of the week, it's super high volume. Let's go fast. Like, if you want to produce more force, you got to move faster. Right. So, lighter percentages, moving the barbell as fast as possible, and then just hammering the GPP work. I couldn't believe how much accessory work and the volume that was programmed in that West Side program. Obviously taking class into account, I'll probably adjust that slightly, but it really prepared my body when I was back into full training. Like, I think it was a huge piece to why I was able to, handle the load and the intensity that I did when I did start lifting again. Yeah,
dude, I've hammered West Side. You guys ever see me get real big all of a sudden? It's because I've pushed like the last 5-6 weeks of like West Side and a lot of bodybuilding as like accessory work.
Yep.
I'm really excited about the powerlifting program because we've kicked around as like that's going to be our first program that we co-write together.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to put you in charge of like the main lift and the first accessory piece, and then whatever the finish, we'll call it finish work is.
Yeah,
And then I'm going to
get big work.
Yeah, yeah, and then I'm gonna try to write in like what I would consider like anyone who, man, if you guys have been in the game long enough to know what CrossFit football is, but it you know, it's like a 5-minute workout. It's heavy. You know, there's conditioning involved, and what I would say is like I want to write a powerlifting programming where the conditioning is what I would write for a strongman, right? Like strongman is like what the conditioning is, and I think it'll be good because I don't want to control writing all of that because I'll overwrite shit. Like it happened to myself. Dude, I was doing crazy stuff, and like 6 weeks later, I'm like, man, my shoulder hurts and all this other stuff because I wasn't doing all of the things, and I was trying to push these crazy workouts. So I think it'll be good to be able to co-write that, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that is something, you know, we early part of the year, like even before we go to that new space, I'd like to have that rolling. So I mean, you know, anybody listening, if you are interested in, you know, talking to me about the powerlifting program, just come find me. You know, I'll let you guys know kind of what it is, and you know, if there's enough interest, like we'll get it done. Like, you know, we'll start getting you guys into it and teach you kind of what it's all about. You know, now, like we're at the new year. Let's do it.
Yeah, and that's anything, right? It's like you want to do powerlifting, good. You want to do gymnastics, good. Like we will deliver on that stuff. Whether those are standalone programs or they're in addition to the class, that's what the real goal is, you know, is that individual touch and that individual direction for people that want more. Because I do, again, like I said, I believe in the class programming more than any class programming. I've put myself up against the biggest names, like if you just look at the workouts, and I believe that what we do in the class equals, number one, results, but two, like longevity, and that has been the big separator for like how we write it. But then there is that specificity, or there's times a year, dude. Like there's gonna be times a year where, like I'm like, man, I want to do powerlifting for a while. Maybe do some powerlifting. Maybe I'll add some running into it. But those are things that, like, you know, I'll get in and start doing it with people too for a while, and then you know, bounce around.
Yeah, no, and it's you know, even if it's, hey, you know, I don't even know what that is, and you just want to see, you know, there's a time for all of it, right? And, you know, getting specific and hammering a weakness for a while is just going to elevate the game across the board. You know, when I went into that powerlifting program, the whole reason was like, I'm an Olympic lifter who's weak, dude. Like I'm looking at the people I'm going against. I'm like, I got to do something. Like, I'm not going to get there just by snatching and clean and jerking every day. Like, I got to get strong.
Yeah, got to get strong.
Yeah.
And that's where something that's cool too with like I see Mako Barbell is like, maybe you come in and you know you want to be a barbell athlete. You like, I want to compete in weightlifting, and then that's where you maybe have a program that kind of marries those two, where it's like, hey, well, look, for the first, we don't have a meet like coming up. So we're like, hey, for the next like 8 to 12 weeks, you're gonna push this powerlifting program. We might still do some power snatches and snatches to keep that range of motion.
Right.
But I'll throw that kind of stuff into an upper body day. Like I like to do
dude,
high hang power stuff. I've done dynamics.
That's your dynamic days.
Yeah. So like that kind of stuff can be married together too, where we can kind of keep the skills high, polished, but also push the strength.
Yeah. We do have a meet on the books, guys, by the way. So right now, I think Carla and I are going to be going to Atlanta in early February.
Okay.
All South Barbell, the Ironborn Open
2021. Nice.
Yep. So if anybody, I know a couple people have expressed interest in competing. All South's a great gym, great environment. It's going to be a really good meet, well run. So, I mean, if you guys are interested, it's a little bit of a drive, but Valentine's Day weekend we'll be heading to Atlanta.
Okay. So, on top of that, I know we've kicked around doing some barbell throwdowns, and that would just be for everybody.
Yep.
Because we've been programming a lot of barbell stuff on Saturdays. We'll aim to get something on the books either for late January, maybe even like mid-February or something. But we do want to throw in I personally want to do like 2 or 3 weeks of like just every Saturday we come in and we do a different lift and we just throw down and have fun with it.
Yeah, I've had a lot of ideas with that. I think looking at like past games, strength events and things like that, like let's do a snatch ladder, let's do a clean ladder, let's do something.
Yeah, we'll set up different. Yeah, we'll set up different skill levels of it. Yeah,
on,
we'll look at look at like people's max lifts, and then we can really target out like a good snatch ladder, and things like that, and have some little fun stuff. I think we can have a lot of fun with it because, one thing that I like to do is just come in and just bring that heat.
Yeah, dude.
I
won't lie, dude. Saturday mornings have become my favorite day. When I walk in on Saturday morning, Barbells are freaking dropping everywhere,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, let's go.
That's
I'm
the
ready
new
to lift
place.
some, I'm ready to lift some weights.
Yeah, dude, that's what the new place gonna be. A lot of yelling.
Yeah.
You know, I yell a lot. I'm a very vocal lifter. I'm always screaming. Hey, but I hit that PR though. You know,
That's
what
it.
I do.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling it, I'm gonna let everybody know I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
When I'm not, I'm just gonna stay back.
I'm just gonna stay quiet.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay quiet. I stay quiet. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think we'll probably wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys have any questions, you know, we talked about a lot there, especially when it comes to programming. We can do a whole. If like anyone has anything specific, we can even hit like a shorter segment on that because we could go into programming and strength.
I think I could talk about programming for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. I mean, like, it's funny is like how much you learn. Like, you know, I mean, you're reading a weightlifting book and you tell me something, and I literally write a gymnastic workout.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, it's gonna be
You
good.
guys got some good stuff coming. For the gymnastics
it's
work.
gonna be good.
Yeah.
I got a little self-regulating gymnastic work that we're gonna do, which I think is gonna be pretty interesting to see how it comes out. But yeah, if you guys have anything, you know, this is the Mako podcast episode 2. So we'll see you guys next time.